I'm Matt Carey, documentary editor at Deadline.com. We are in the Deadline studio at the Toronto International Film Festival. The film is Love and War. We're with the Oscar-winning filmmaker Chai Vasarhelyi and Lynsey Addario, the Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer. This is about your extraordinary work in the field as a conflict photographer around the world. Firstly, Chai, tell us about making a film about Lynsey and what about her story really spoke to you.
Well, first off, it's the work. I've been a longtime fan of Lynsey's work. It's singular. It's shaped how we see conflict, how we see war, and especially with a very compassionate eye towards women and children who are very much affected by these conflicts. And then there's the woman who is extraordinary, and how she does it. I was very curious. I also felt like, journalism is under attack, and to be able to showcase or share a story of a remarkable journalist who really has the courage to speak out and to put herself in harm's way in order to capture these images for us, that was a story worthwhile.
Lynsey, how difficult was it for you being the subject, the focus of a film? Because naturally, as a journalist, you are about documenting other people's lives and other situations of enormous conflict and tension around the world.
Yeah, it was very strange to have the camera on me for the first time. And but again, one thing that was difficult is that me as a journalist who goes in to document people's lives over a period of time, I kind of felt like I knew what Chai was looking for. So I felt like I needed to really be transparent about my life and who I am, because I wanted it to be true and honest. And I did not want the film to be a pretty picture, because this life is not easy. And there are a lot of people suffer because of the work I do. And so I think it's important to show that struggle of, motherhood and being a war correspondent and the constant struggle for some sort of balance.
I was in the film, you're a mom to two young children, and you live in London with your husband, who's also a journalist. And we certainly see that there's a double standard in terms of how people respond to a conflict photographer who's a woman who has kids versus a man. I think of Mstislav Chernov, Pulitzer Prize winner as well, extraordinary
Amazing, yeah.
filmmaker and photographer who has kids himself. And yet we don't think about, wait a minute, why are you out in the field doing this? And yet that's a question you face constantly.
Constantly. People always say to me, how can I risk my life? How can you risk your life as a mother? How can you leave your kids alone? Well, they're not alone. They have a father. And, for some reason, people assume if a mother risks her life, it's worse than if a father risks his life. And I think, I've been in the field in Iraq, and there have been people whose wives were literally giving birth, and they were covering an assignment, and they didn't even go home for the birth, and they're not criticized. And so I think it's a constant double standard.
Indeed. Yeah, I think that's one of the most fascinating elements of the film. It's a completely gripping film, very visceral. There's a moment about 14 minutes in on an explosion in Ukraine that just absolutely rocked me. It's kind of a terrifying film, as it should be for someone who's documented what you have done. Chai, I'm sort of curious about what you admire about Lynsey. You spoke about the work, but this is someone for whom this work it's part of her identity. But through her work, she's also shining a light on enormously important issues and, in many cases, saving lives, as we see in the case of your coverage in Africa.
I think what I admire most about the work is where it intersects with the woman, where there is a fundamental integrity and honesty to the approach and also to what she's capturing. And that there's heart in it, there's compassion in it. And, I think especially as journalism is under attack in every way possible, the idea that authentic, true images can come out and that will shape public opinion, and that we have a compassionate heart behind it, who's also honed her craft as an excellent photographer. The eye is great, but there's also an intention behind the photographs that I think is really moving. And I think that when you get to know Lynsey as a person and you understand what she's juggling personally at home and work, or in, you know, the sexism that's prevalent in all of our, you know, fields, you know, there's a real authenticity that emerges. It's organic, it's legit, and I think it kind of, the film exudes it, you know.
And you certainly feel, I think, a strong moral responsibility to document what you have shown through your photographs, most recently in Ukraine, where you are showing the deliberate targeting by Russia on civilians. I mean, one could add the deliberate targeting of the media, of news media as well. But if you are not there and others like you who are courageous, the world doesn't understand these horrific abuses that are happening.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. I think the case in Ukraine where the family was killed in front of me, the difference about that attack was that I actually was in that attack and survived that attack. So in many cases, I've covered war for 20 years, and what happens is we hear about a mortar attack, or we hear about a missile strike, and we go to the scene and we have to kind of do all the reporting around what happened and how that civilian was killed. But in this case, I was there. So I knew it. I knew that the Russian troops were bracketing literally onto a civilian evacuation route. And so it was impossible for Putin to say, for example, we weren't deliberately targeting civilians, because I watched the deliberate targeting. So there is something to be said about physically being present. And photographers, unlike reporters or people who can do a lot of reporting from afar, we have to be there. We have to be right in the middle of the action. And so the danger is a lot more.
Yeah, try, from your point of view, how important is the kind of coverage that Lynsey does? And you spoke to being able to impact policy. But if we look at war photography in particular, there are images of war that have changed, certainly American public opinion, I think, of, you know, the napalm girl photograph or the Eddie Adams photograph, men being killed in the street in Vietnam. I mean, words alone do not move people. Pictures are essential.
I mean, I think we're talking about, you know, the film opens with this scene of Lynsey photographing what transpired on the Irpin Bridge in Ukraine, and that, you know, the film tells the story of how it was eventually presented on the Senate floor, how it really, and the, you know, the fight to make sure it's published, you know, on the front page of the New York Times, and, you know, and also how Lynsey and journalists kind of negotiate like the ethics of these images. So, you know, I think the film really I think it's essential, the work that Lynsey does. And we were trying to kind of fill out the story and try to make vivid for audiences what that experience is like and how essential that work is.
Why do you shoot in color?
Oh, it's a good question. I started in black and white. I started in the darkroom, actually. Now I'm really dating myself, but I started in the darkroom, and I used to always shoot in black and white. And I guess after September 11th, I was living in Mexico City. I flew back to New York on the first flight after the airport opened. I think it was like the 14th of September or something. And my agent at the time handed me a digital camera, and it was enormous. And he said, learn how to use it on the plane. And I flew to Pakistan. And at that point, everything was so time sensitive because it was after September 11th, and I just was shooting color. And then I started seeing everything in color. And so I've only shot 2 stories in black and white really in the last sort of 15 years. One was the Talibanistan. It was the cover of the New York Times Magazine that was part of a Pulitzer package in 2009. And another was in Sudan, in Chad recently.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah.
Love and War. It's with National Geographic. You've done many films with them, including the Oscar-winning Free Solo. When are people outside the context of film festivals going to get to see the film?
Yes, so Love and War will be in theaters October 29th, and then it will stream on Disney Plus November 4th.
Well, thank you so much, Director Chai Vasarhelyi. You directed with Jimmy Chin and with Lynsey Addario. It's such an enormous pleasure to meet you and to celebrate your work and your courage through this film. So thank you for being with us in the Deadline Studio.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt.